Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Today we have another Bigfoot story. I've been talking to this guy a little bit this past week, and he has some interesting stuff. He has a little bit more than we're going to put in this video, but we're going to kind of narrow down to some of the main encounters that this guy has had that are really riveting, kind of sitting on the edge of your seat kind of stories. Just introduce yourself and tell the story, and you can start anytime you want.
So, again, this incident, it really did throw me for a loop, because I had grown up, in a very analytical and kind of scientific household. My father was a psychologist, so he always, I had dinosaur books as a kid. And so what I'm getting to is I was really familiar with the fossil record, and thus, after high school, kind of followed suit in a bit of a science background in university then. So, and this happened just after that. So, it really created this paradox for what was then real. And that's what I would say why this really affected me. So anyway, if you would ask me beforehand actually what I believed in, I would say that 10 reasons why something like this, Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever they are, couldn't exist. Because, I was following essentially the narrative of my professors that I had just come out of, and whether eager to please or do well, I just kind of accepted the standard view of science as pretty much undisputable, and anyone who claimed these really fantastical sightings, I always thought, well, they probably don't really know what they're seeing. And, with the whole studies with how people can run into the room and fake stealing a person, run off, and then they'll ask the classroom of people what the person looked like. Well, the descriptions will be all over the place. So I really didn't think people knew what they were looking at. So when I actually there was actually two parts to this encounter. The first part was, I'll kind of set the stage for you. I was on Vancouver Island here, where I currently live, and I was in an RV with my mom. We had just moved out here and exploring the island, which kind of just around Victoria, where I live, is urbanized, and it's fairly one of the top 10 biggest cities in Canada, so it's fairly sizable. But once you get outside of the city, the island can be very, very rugged and wilderness. So we were actually just outside of the town of Tofino, which is on the west coast of the island, and it's right in Pacific Rim National Park. But we were just outside of that. I believe Kennedy Lake is exactly the campground, and it's about 35 kilometers outside of Tofino. And we had pulled in there with the RV, and the first night nothing happened. We'd just kind of gotten there a little bit late, and pretty much just cooked on the fire. I had a couple beers, and she went to bed, and I just hung out, and no one was around. Also, I should mention that it was May, so it was before the campgrounds got really busy. So it was also a weekday, and it was kind of the idea anyway, because we wanted to make our way up to the island, after the tip of the island, after just moving out here, and then drive back. And that's why I went along, because she's not comfortable driving a big vehicle. I have a lot of commercial driving experience. So the first night, nothing. And then the second night, all that happened was, how a lot of campgrounds are on gravel, and that, they just build them off the forest floor with, a bed of gravel. So we were both sitting kind of at the dining room table in the RV after, the fire was still glowing, but let it burn down. And it was just before I kind of went off to my section to go to bed that I heard the distinct crunching of gravel, and not the soft quadrupedal steps of say a bear with as large soft paw pads. It was what sounded to me almost more like work boots. recreationally, just doing his patrols. And he never left his car. He was a lazy guy. So this really scared my mom. And I said, no, it's fine. I mean, don't worry. And she consoled herself with saying, well, it's just a deer or a moose or something, or maybe a bear, even though she was looking at the light, couldn't see anything. But just, she knew she almost didn't believe her own words, because you could just hear crunch, 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 and then it would stop for a while, and then, so something was definitely around. It was a very noisy kind of sound, actually, when you're in a quiet forest campground, right? So, I don't know, I just couldn't, in my mind, what I thought it was, at that point anyway, I couldn't get past just some big, heavy dude. Anyway, so kind of forgetting that the next morning, of course, no evidence, it's gravel, and I didn't think to look for prints. In fact, it's still up to this point, if you'd asked me if I believe in anything like that, I'd say, of course not. So, this night is where it really, really had essentially a level of fear that I didn't know was, and not so much that I was scared for my safety, but just that not knowing what I'm seeing, that's just what scared me the most. Like, as a little kid, I was most scared of alien movies instead of, like, some monster, because the idea of not knowing what their intention, or, just a little kid's imagination, but I just couldn't, I don't know, that part was what really affected me. So, how I had the encounter was, I was walking from the RV to the comfort station, kind of, I guess you'd call them, where the bathrooms and showers are. And a lot of Canadian parks have really nice, like, hot showers, and they're fairly well kept. So I preferred to use that bathroom instead of the RV bathroom, which is understandable. Yeah. So I was walking from the RV to the comfort station, which was, the direct route would have been about 80 to 100 yards along, but it was so dark under the Pacific kind of forest canopy. So I kind of walked out toward the edge of we were just on, our site was just on the edge of where I guess the Tofino airport would be. I think that's which has a huge plot of land. And it was cleared enough at the edge of the campground that you could walk with some light instead of just under the mossy, thick forest of the Pacific out here. So, so I go out to this kind of clearing to walk toward the comfort station, and as I am doing so, I see what I thought was another camper doing the same thing, but he looked like kind of tending to maybe a sandal, like bent over, but like not quite how someone would tie a shoe with their butt way up, more like squatting down to pick up a golf ball kind of thing. But his back was to me, so at this point, I didn't want to startle somebody, so I'm about maybe 10 meters away still. So I kind of make kind of a clearing of the throat sound or something like that. I still wasn't even really concerned about this individual, because I'm not I'm kind of a sizable, strong guy, so I'm not really scared of just one person anyway. But, so I walk, and it snaps around, like turns around, and this is where it starts to set me into a stage of shock, followed by the deepest level of fear I didn't even know was possible. So it snapped around very quickly, and that's when I knew something was off or wrong. I still didn't know, because it wasn't like a full moon or anything. There was maybe some moonlight, but I remember it was cloudy, and maybe enough moonlight to take that route instead of the darker trail to the bathroom. So when taking this route, I come face to face with this thing, snaps around, and it's kind of standing like. First of all, I'll say it wasn't actually. It wasn't like Patty. It was about my height, actually, which is about 5'11", but it was obviously very, very strong. And it was standing almost kind of like how a gunslinger would with his hands at his sides, like not too close to his hips, but out, maybe about a foot from his hips. Okay. So, and with his knees bent. So maybe it was actually taller, but when doing this stance, it was my height anyway. And the best way I could describe it, kind of like what I told you in the email, was it wasn't like sick like Patty, but it was like a buddy of mine it just reminded me of a buddy of mine in high school who was kind of slender, but he took steroids and got like muscly, but he was still that slender frame. Yeah. So it almost looked like this thing it had a lot of muscle, but it wasn't. It looked fast. It looked fast as hell. That's the best way I could describe. Yeah, with this weird kind of blocky muscle, I guess. Yeah. Not totally like a bodybuilder, more like a bonobo. Actually, that's the description I've kind of used. Not like a fat pot-bellied chimpanzee, but more the leaner bonobos, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So this is where it's just seared into my memory. So when it stands up and it's doing this thing where its hands are at its sides, it then lifts its head up enough that I can now see what I'm looking at is insane. That there's enough light on that I can see this thing now, and it was just made these kind of huffing sounds and kind of slight bobbing and weaving, kind of trying to get a better look, because it probably had more light on it than I had on me, because I was coming out of the forest cover. Even though it was looking right at me, there's no mistake of that. It knew exactly where I was. But I still got the impression that I could see it fairly well, too, because it was more illuminated by the moon, just based on how the angle was. So looking into the space, the way it looked at me kind of was like, you know, when someone looks at you like, not really angry, but just kind of like you're a stranger, just an indifferent person, and you just kind of still take that as hostile. Yeah. So it was kind of looking at me, doing this like kind of boxers bobbing and weaving, and then at one point, once it tilted to one, it just froze, because maybe you just got the best look at that. I probably froze too, or made some kind of, like, I don't know. At some point, whatever I did, it just froze. And then it made one loud hop, like a kind of like a deer snort wheeze, which actually scares me to this day when I'm watching a hunting video or something, just because it can be so loud when deer do it that it just kind of takes me back to that anyway. But anyway, this is where it takes off to its left, but it almost looks like it's going down to dive or do a break fall or a roll, because it's getting lower and lower with each step, and the damn thing accelerates to a speed that it literally, I think I even just dropped my toothbrush right there on the I didn't find it anyway. I didn't even go back to that route ever again. I think we left the next afternoon, and we spent most of that day in town. But anyway, this thing took off, and instead, it didn't go on all fours, but it used its arms kind of like in a brachiating motion, like for obstacles and rocks or tree limbs. So it used its arms just as much in its running, but it still wasn't on all fours, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It swung through the trees. Like, okay, and where it took off, in the direction it took off, it was actually cutting across the corner having 100 yards maybe across the corner of the field to get to another section of forest that was not part of the campground. And it was using its arms very much to swing around things. Like there's a lot of rock and, you know, fallen trees and regrowth and stuff. And this is where I'll always remember this part too. I followed it as far as I could, and the tearing through the brush. And once it got to this tree cover, it stopped, and I'm 100% sure the sound came from this creature. I mean, what other creature would hang around right where this thing looked like it went? And I heard this kind of sound like a, I think Les Stroud did a pretty good impression of it once. In that video, Survivor Man video, when he first heard, he didn't have the camera running, but he describes the sound. So, fuck, I hate being interrupted like that. Sorry. So, the sound it made was kind of, I won't even, I'll probably just make a mockery and people would laugh at me, but it was kind of a wah, 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 but very deep and very loud, just a booming like wah, 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 like starting low and rising in tone.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is what I'll always remember. There's only one highway that runs out toward Tofino from the main island highway, Trans-Canada Highway, and out toward the highway from this campground, an even louder sound came that was just like that one, but it was way farther off. But I could tell this was like, I don't know, it was even more powerful. It was the only thing I remember seeing lions at the Toronto Zoo, and just kind of the base where you can feel it, like that had that quality to it. Even though I was too far away to feel that sensation of being like hit in the chest by it, it had that kind of resonance. Maybe, you know, because it sure traveled far. That's probably what enabled it to do that, I guess. But I wanted to tell you this story, but more kind of also the effect this had on me was so tremendous that it just shook up my entire worldview. I didn't know what was real anymore. Like, and I think there's a lot of foolery when it comes to the Bigfoot issue, but I think a few videos that I had seen, very few actual film videos on YouTube are actually real. I think there's a lot of foolery with some of them or whatnot, but I remember one in particular. I don't know, is it okay to name examples or whatever?
Yeah.
But it is okay. So he wasn't a Bigfoot researcher, but he's a bow hunter, and he's got this web bow hunting show called World Hunting Group, and his name is Tim Wells. I don't know if you've heard of him or whatnot, but anyway, in Idaho, look it up on YouTube. I think it's called Bigfoot Sighting in High Def, and he spells high def in a silly way, like literally H-I, and then def, like D-E-F. And he's just a hunting guy. It has nothing to do with Bigfoot. Even in the video, he just says you see it, actually. You know, I don't have to describe it. You can just look it up. He comes across the creature and snatches the camera out of the guy's hand and runs, kind of trying to get it on tape. I could tell that was real just because it was, I don't know, like you can just kind of tell if you've had an experience, like what else is real for the people fortunate to catch it on camera. You know what I mean? Like, there was also that scene, like in Apocalypse Now, like way back where Francis Ford Coppola had that film where the cow is cut in half. Before I even researched that, I knew that scene was real. Just how the cow moved, you can just see the shock. And I found out that they didn't kill the cow for the movie. It was just an indigenous festival going on in Indonesia where he filmed his movie already taking place. So he filmed it anyway and threw it in the film.
Right.
So I'm just using that as an example to kind of indicate what you can kind of tell in terms of other videos that are real. But just getting off on that. But I could very much tell that was, because it was similar to what I saw. It had that and I'll finish with this. My roommate getting pissed for using his phone, but I'll finish with this one point with why it negatively affected me so much is because it felt like I had this secret or just knowledge that no one else would either believe, and it very much isolated me. I very much felt isolated for many years, to tell you the truth. And I drank I had trouble with relationships. Like I don't know, all my friends and colleagues, who are biology majors, engineers, not going to believe me. I'll be crazy. So I kept it secret, and I didn't want to. I don't know. It just made it hard to go back to normal, like how I was before. I couldn't. Right. So I just, it really did have a huge impact on my life, actually. People think, oh, I wish I could see something like that. And I say, why? Like, so, do you wish you could, have everything shook up and turned upside? Like, it's not something that's that light of an issue to experience. Like, I've been really into reading about actually Dogman and stuff. I've never seen anything like that, but I've been really into reading like that, but encounters like that, because to me that's 10 times scarier. And the level of fear I felt from this was just mostly from the unknown, but that's what kind of really shaped, I don't know,
I think
the next few years of my life anyway.
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
I think that for you're a scientist, and you do actually have degree in science stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually from Waterloo in applied health sciences. It's just a 4-year undergrad degree, but still more. I was very much around that growing up.
And you were in the scientific type mindset of biology and or in the Darwin evolution, the things that you I have a degree. And look, when I came out of college, I was doubting my faith. I was doubting there's something about college and the science that is taught in our schools that is off base to reality in such a way to when you have an encounter with something like this and you see what some of reality, that it turned your world upside down, and what you had been living was a lie. Partly, and that's kind of a very vague description of what I think that you endured, coming out of what your worldview was, and then you found out your worldview was wrong. And there's stuff in this world that the scientific community does not recognize, and when you find out that there's stuff in this world that they're not recognizing, then how much of it's true and how much is not, I
realized it really made me more obedient than be a critical thinker, because if this really turns out to be, very much a real biological creature, which I don't know, I'm not going to get into that, but it would sure make me feel stupid if I dedicated my whole career to not even giving someone a chance to explain, like, to say, hey, this really happened. And if I just brush it off as, oh, it was misidentification, it was a bear, I'm like, no, I just took off on 2 legs, very much like the video I described on YouTube that I believe to be real does. And, and really, my education, I would say, really taught me more to be obedient than to really be a good thinker. And I think to be a good thinker is what you have to balance between things, and that's what saved me in the end, because this was a few years ago. And it's like this. When I first started doing this, I was covering mysteries, and I had a few encounters of my own, and I shared those and what have you, and then I started getting other people sharing with me. But the reality of there being stuff that is hidden from this world, it's just incredible to think about. And the fact that there is such thing as a Bigfoot, and it is living near our
populations. It's not even that deep in the forest. I mean, a lot of times they're on the edges of golf courses, and people are walking right by, and they have no idea. It's incredible. They're so good at hiding. It's amazing. But let's go back to your encounter you had when this thing took off. It began to run, and you were talking about the way that it used its hands and arms. I heard someone saying that it was almost as if it was swimming through the forest and the brush and what have you, using its arms to sweep the things out of the way and maybe even propel itself a little bit. Is that kind of what it looked like it was doing?
That's a perfect description. You summed it all up in that one word. That's exactly what it looked like. But just very efficient and perfect at what it does.
Right, swimming.
But I definitely have to give my roommate mate's phone back. I really want to continue, but is it okay if we do it in like the 2-part thing, or I could I don't know, figure out the rest, just because I really
we'll have you back. We'll just stop right here, and we'll let this be a 30-minute episode, and then we'll have you back on, and we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the other aspects of it. So I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much, and I will be in contact with you on email, and we'll figure it out from there. Is that all right?
Oh, totally. Thank you very much, Brendan, for your time. And, any questions, don't hesitate to email.